They say the past is behind us, that it cannot touch us, but that is a lie we tell ourselves to feel safe. Every family carries hidden shadows, silent stories of pain, fear, and unspoken rules that shape the way we think, the way we feel, the way we breathe. These are not mere memories. They are chains, invisible threads that tie us to the mistakes, the traumas, and the unhealed wounds of those who came before us. And yet, within us lies the spark, the one choice that can shatter these chains forever. But freedom is not without its price. To break generational demons is to step into the storm, to face truths that may terrify, to challenge patterns that everyone else around you takes for granted. It is to feel the weight of loneliness when no one understands, to hear the echoes of resistance from those who fear the change you dare to make. And still, despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the cost, you will rise. Not because the path is easy, but because you are determined to claim a life that is yours and yours alone, a life unshackled from the invisible prisons of the past. This is the journey we are about to take together, the journey that demands courage, that demands reflection, that demands that we look into the shadows and say, no more. The hidden chains of the past. We often believe that we are born free, that we carry nothing but our own choices and our own intentions. Yet, if we look closely, we begin to see the subtle, invisible threads that stretch backward, tying us to a history we did not choose but inherited nonetheless. These threads are delicate, almost imperceptible at first, a whispered doubt, a habit of fear, a recurring pattern that seems to follow us no matter how hard we try to escape. They are the hidden chains of the past, chains forged by those who walked before us, passed down through silence, through unresolved pain, through decisions made in desperation or anger or ignorance. They live in our minds long after the voices that created them have gone quiet. And the cruel thing is, we often do not recognize them for what they are. We mistake them for our own weaknesses, our own failings, when in truth, they are echoes of battles fought before we were even born. These chains manifest in ways so subtle that we barely notice them at first. A fear of intimacy, an instinctive need to control, a compulsion to please, or a shadow of guilt that never truly leaves us. These are not random. They are inherited. The patterns are as unique as the families they come from, but the mechanism is universal. Every unhealed wound, every suppressed grief, every wrong turned into silence has a way of quietly embedding itself in the next generation. We carry these legacies often without question, because the world around us tells us to accept them. We are taught to respect tradition, to honor our elders, to avoid conflict, to endure in silence. And in doing so, we become unwitting prisoners. The chains are invisible, yes, but their weight is undeniable. They shape our decisions, our relationships, our sense of self-worth. They whisper in moments of doubt, reminding us that we are never truly free. Breaking free begins with recognition. It begins with the willingness to look directly at the shadows we inherited, to name them, to see them for what they truly are, not a reflection of who we are, but a reflection of what we have inherited. This is a painful process. It requires honesty that can cut deeper than any external wound. It demands that we confront the patterns that have shaped us, patterns we may have defended our entire lives without realizing it. It is a delicate confrontation, one that requires both courage and humility. Courage, because it is terrifying to face what is hidden. Humility, because we must admit that not all of our struggles are our own, that some were placed upon us long before we could even understand them. To deny this is to remain chained, to live in a repetition of pain we cannot trace, a cycle we cannot escape. And yet, recognition alone is not enough. Seeing the chains does not mean they will fall. Understanding their origin does not release their grip. To truly break them requires action, a deliberate, often painful act of will. It requires us to refuse to pass them on. It requires us to question, to challenge, to change patterns that everyone around us may still hold dear. This is the price, the discomfort of disrupting the familiar, the alienation that can come when others do not understand our need to change, the fear of stepping into a void where no path is clearly marked. Every step toward freedom is a step away from comfort, a step into uncertainty, a step that demands the utmost commitment. But here is the paradox. In the very act of breaking these chains, we find power. The same threads that once bound us become guides, illuminating the patterns we are determined to leave behind. Every inherited wound we confront becomes a marker of resilience. Every fear we name becomes a tool of clarity. Every moment of discomfort, every pang of loneliness, every whisper of doubt becomes proof that we are doing what few dare to do. We are reclaiming our own lives. And as the chains begin to fall, one link at a time, we discover a freedom that is deeper than we ever imagined. A freedom not just from our own inherited pain, but from the invisible prisons that would otherwise claim the next generation. It is important to understand that these chains are not a judgment, nor are they a condemnation. They are simply what is, a legacy of human experience passed down through imperfect lives, through the choices of parents, grandparents, ancestors we may never have met, whose stories we carry unknowingly. They are a reminder that life is never a solitary journey, that the past lives on in ways both subtle and profound. And yet they are also a reminder of our responsibility, to ourselves, to those who will come after us, to the promise that freedom can be more than a dream. To break these chains is to honor the pain of those who came before by refusing to let it dictate the future. It is to say, with clarity and conviction, that the past does not have the final word. So when you look inward, when you feel that quiet resistance in your thoughts, that echo of doubt or fear or guilt, remember that it is not yours alone. It is inherited, it is shared, and it can be unmade. The first step is acknowledgement. The second step is courage. The third step is action. And in these steps, no matter how heavy, no matter how long, no matter how painful, lies the seed of liberation. The chains of the past are formidable, yes, but they are not unbreakable. And the moment you recognize them, name them, and resolve to step beyond them, you take the first step toward a freedom that is worth every price. The courage to confront. Courage is often misunderstood. We imagine it as something loud, heroic, visible to all, a storm of action, a battle fought with swords, fists, or words. But true courage, the kind that breaks generational demons, is quieter. It is the courage to face what lives inside, to confront the truths we have been avoiding for a lifetime, to look squarely at the inherited patterns that have shaped our fears, our insecurities, our habits, our very identities. This confrontation is not against another person, at least not at first. It is against the shadows that live within us, the whispers of the past that have dictated our choices without our consent. It is terrifying because it exposes us to ourselves in ways we have long resisted, forcing us to face aspects of our history, our family, our upbringing, and even our own minds that we might rather keep hidden. And yet, it is this very confrontation that is the gateway to freedom, for nothing can be changed without being seen. To confront these generational demons requires honesty that can be uncomfortable, raw, and at times overwhelming. It demands that we admit truths that others may deny or dismiss. Perhaps it is the realization that patterns of fear and control have been quietly passed down for generations. Perhaps it is understanding that certain choices, repeated endlessly, were never really ours. They were inherited. Facing these truths is not an easy process. It is a process that strips away comforting illusions and exposes us to the vulnerability of being human. There is a weight in recognizing that so much of what we thought we controlled has been orchestrated by patterns older than ourselves. And yet, to deny this is to remain captive, to live in a cycle that will repeat itself until we find the courage to act. Confrontation demands a willingness to feel discomfort. To see the truth about the past is to face a storm of emotions, anger at injustices we never asked for, grief for the pain we unknowingly carried, guilt for the moments we failed to recognize the patterns while we were living them. And sometimes it is fear. Fear that in breaking free, we may alienate those who still cling to old ways. Fear that change will leave us alone, that in stepping forward we are stepping into an emptiness without guide or support. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is action taken despite fear. It is stepping forward when every instinct tells you to retreat. It is looking directly at the chains that have bound you and saying, I will no longer be controlled by you. This is the first act of real bravery, the refusal to be complicit in the repetition of history. And courage is not only personal, it is transformative. When we confront our own inherited shadows, we create ripples that reach far beyond ourselves. Every fear we name, every cycle we break, every pattern we refuse to replicate reshapes the world around us. Our courage becomes a beacon for others, a signal that it is possible to stand, to face the darkness, and to refuse to be held captive by it. But this courage also comes at a cost. Families may resist, friends may misunderstand, and society may view your rebellion against inherited norms as defiance. Standing apart is lonely, and yet it is in this solitude that courage is forged. True courage is forged not in applause or recognition, but in the quiet moments when you choose the harder path simply because it is the right one. Confrontation requires both reflection and action. Reflection alone can lead to paralysis, overthinking, doubting, questioning endlessly without moving. Action alone, ungrounded in reflection, risks repeating mistakes or creating new harm. Courage exists in the balance, in the willingness to examine the roots of your inherited pain, to understand its influence, and to act decisively to dismantle it. It is in naming the chains, understanding their origin, and deliberately choosing behaviors that reject them. The courage to confront is not a one-time act. It is a constant process, a daily commitment to awareness and intentional living. Every decision, every word, every choice becomes a test of whether you will perpetuate the past or define a new path for yourself. And here lies the paradox. The very confrontation that terrifies us also empowers us. When we face the patterns of fear, control, and limitation that have been passed down to us, we reclaim a power we never realized we had. What once controlled us now becomes visible, manageable, and ultimately conquerable. The courage to confront does not erase the past, nor does it make the pain vanish, but it transforms it into knowledge, into insight, into a tool that we can use to create a life of freedom and intentionality. Every confrontation is a step towards self-sovereignty, a step away from the invisible puppeteers of inherited fear. So, when the past whispers its familiar threats, when the patterns of generations before you attempt to pull you back into repetition, remember this. Courage is not in ignoring the shadows, it is in facing them. It is in speaking the truths no one else dares to voice. It is in sitting with discomfort, leaning into fear, and acting with clarity despite it. It is in knowing that the price of confronting these demons is high, but the cost of not confronting them is far higher, for it is a life lived in chains, a cycle perpetuated, a freedom forever deferred. To confront is to choose yourself, to choose truth over comfort, courage over fear, and life over the shadows of the past. In that confrontation, in that deliberate act of bravery, you begin to glimpse what it truly means to be free. The loneliness of change. Change is rarely comfortable. It is rarely welcomed. The moment you decide to step away from the patterns that have defined your family, your relationships, your very sense of self, you enter a landscape few others can understand. The shadows of the past cling tightly to those around you, and the people who have lived within those shadows often resist the light you are trying to bring. Family may look at you with confusion, friends may question your choices, and society may whisper that you are being reckless, disloyal, or ungrateful. And in that resistance, in the silence or judgment of those who cannot yet comprehend your journey, you discover a profound truth. To break generational demons is often a lonely path. Solitude becomes your companion, discomfort your teacher, and clarity your only guide. This loneliness is not merely physical, it is psychological, emotional, and spiritual. You may find that conversations you once had with ease now feel impossible. You may feel isolated in rooms full of people, unseen in circles that once felt familiar. The act of changing, of breaking free, creates distance because transformation is inherently disruptive. It challenges the status quo, and when patterns have persisted for generations, the status quo is deeply entrenched. People are conditioned to preserve what they know, to cling to familiar routines, to avoid the unease of confronting truths that might unsettle them. And so, when you step out of these patterns, you step away from the comfort of collective illusion into the uncharted territory of self-determination. It is here, in this uncharted territory, that loneliness becomes both a burden and a proving ground. Yet, there is a strange beauty in this loneliness. In the quiet moments, when the noise of expectation falls away, you begin to hear yourself clearly. You begin to understand the desires, the fears, the truths that have been muted by generations of inherited behavior. Solitude sharpens perception. It brings into focus the very aspects of life that had been obscured by repetition, fear, and compliance. And in this clarity, you find the first seeds of freedom. The loneliness is not a punishment. It is a necessary companion in the process of breaking free. Without it, without the space to confront yourself unflinchingly, the inherited patterns might continue unnoticed, quietly guiding your choices, limiting your potential, and shaping your destiny in ways you cannot control. Change is not a single act. It is a series of decisions, each one breaking a thread that connects you to the past. With every decision, you face resistance, from others, from yourself, and from the deep-seated habits that were instilled long before you had a voice of your own. In these moments, the loneliness intensifies because you realize that transformation requires stepping alone into discomfort, into uncertainty, into the unknown. There is no manual, no map, no promise that the path ahead will be smooth or understood. And yet, the act of stepping forward despite this uncertainty is precisely what shapes character, fortifies resolve, and cultivates the resilience necessary to not only survive change, but to thrive within it. The loneliness of change also tests relationships. Bonds that once seemed unbreakable may strain or fracture as you refuse to conform to outdated patterns. People who were once anchors may become mirrors reflecting your own discomfort, highlighting the discrepancies between your inherited past and the future you are creating. And though this may bring pain, it is an essential part of the process. Transformation demands authenticity, and authenticity requires honesty, even when that honesty disrupts established connections. In the wake of this disruption, you may grieve, but that grief is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you are evolving, that you are no longer willing to sacrifice your freedom for the comfort of familiarity. And yet, in the midst of this loneliness, there is an extraordinary gift, the gift of self-reliance. When you step into solitude, when you embrace the discomfort of change, you discover an inner strength you never knew existed. You learn that you are capable of standing alone, of thinking independently, of making choices unshaped by fear or inherited expectation. This strength is not born in the applause of others, nor in the validation of those around you. It is born in the quiet, often unseen moments of courage, the moments when you choose to face yourself honestly, to question inherited truths, and to reject what no longer serves your growth. In these moments you discover that solitude is not emptiness, it is empowerment. The loneliness of change is also temporary in a paradoxical sense. It lasts as long as the patterns of the past cling to those around you. But with every step you take, with every pattern you dismantle, with every truth you confront, the path becomes less lonely. Others may follow in time, inspired by your courage. New relationships may form, rooted in authenticity rather than conformity. And the legacy you leave behind, once shaped by fear and repetition, begins to transform into a story of choice, resilience, and freedom. What once seemed unbearable becomes a crucible, refining your spirit, sharpening your clarity, and preparing you to lead not only yourself, but future generations toward liberation. So, when you feel the weight of isolation pressing against your chest, when the familiar world seems distant and the voices of dissent echo louder than encouragement, remember this: the loneliness of change is a necessary part of growth. It is a signal that you are moving beyond what is comfortable, beyond what is inherited, beyond what others expect. It is the echo of courage reverberating within you, the silence that precedes transformation, and the space in which freedom begins to take root. Embrace it, endure it, and let it shape you, for it is through this loneliness that you will emerge unbound, resilient, and ready to claim a life that is fully your own. The weight of responsibility. Breaking free from generational demons is not only a personal journey, it is a responsibility that reaches far beyond the confines of our own lives. Once you see the patterns that have shaped your family, once you recognize the cycles of fear, neglect, or limitation that have quietly governed decisions for generations, a new awareness arises. You realize that your actions, your choices, your willingness to confront the past are no longer only about you. They ripple outward, touching siblings, children, and even those you have never met. The chains you inherit are not just yours, they are collective, and the effort required to break them carries a weight heavier than most can imagine. Freedom is not a selfish pursuit. It is a commitment to something greater than comfort, greater than personal ease, greater than the temporary relief of avoiding responsibility. Responsibility comes first as a recognition of influence. By stepping into the courage to change, you acknowledge that your life has the potential to shift the narrative not only for yourself, but for generations that follow. It is a profound realization. Every act of courage, every moment of integrity, every choice to reject harmful cycles contributes to a legacy that extends far beyond your own lifespan. But with this awareness comes pressure. The weight of responsibility is often silent, subtle, but unrelenting. You may feel the constant pull of expectations, the invisible eyes of tradition, the unspoken judgments of those who do not yet understand the path you have chosen. The more conscious you become of the patterns you are dismantling, the heavier the weight of responsibility can feel. It is an invisible burden, pressing upon your mind and heart, demanding vigilance and unwavering commitment. The responsibility is also intensely personal. You cannot delegate it, ignore it, or postpone it indefinitely. It is not enough to hope that someone else will notice the chains and break them. Change begins with you, in the quiet, often unnoticed moments of decision. Every choice to act with awareness, to respond rather than react, to refuse the repetition of inherited mistakes, is a small but significant step in dismantling the cycles that have persisted for generations. It is a discipline, a form of guardianship over your own life and over the lives of those who will follow. Ignoring this responsibility comes at a cost far greater than the temporary discomfort of taking it on. To remain passive is to perpetuate the patterns, to silently allow the shadows of the past to dictate the future. And yet, responsibility is not punishment. It is a power, a privilege, and a calling. To recognize the patterns that have shaped your life is to gain insight that few possess. With that insight comes the ability to choose differently, to act differently, to live differently. But power and privilege carry weight. They demand that you approach your decisions with thoughtfulness, with care, with integrity. Every action you take, or fail to take, matters. Every word you speak, every boundary you set, every habit you alter has consequences, seen and unseen. To treat responsibility lightly is to risk undoing the very progress you have fought so hard to achieve. The journey toward freedom is not just about breaking chains. It is about holding the space of transformation responsibly, honoring the effort it has required, and ensuring that it is not squandered. Responsibility also requires awareness of the future. Breaking generational demons is not merely an act of rebellion against the past, it is an investment in what comes next. Your actions, choices, and courage create a framework for the generations that will follow. Children, nieces, nephews, even distant relatives may inherit the outcomes of your determination, whether they realize it or not. This is both humbling and daunting. It demands that you consider not only the immediate consequences of your actions, but the long-term impact on those who will live in a world you help shape. It is a reminder that freedom is not simply an individual gift. It is a legacy, and legacy is sacred in its weight and consequence. The weight of responsibility is also an emotional burden. It is the quiet knowledge that your growth may make others uncomfortable, that your refusal to perpetuate cycles may strain or sever relationships, that the very act of claiming freedom can be misunderstood as defiance. It is a constant balancing act, holding firm in your choices while remaining compassionate toward those still navigating their own inherited struggles. Yet, in this tension, there is clarity. Responsibility is never passive. It is active, engaged, deliberate, and sustained. It requires patience with yourself, patience with others, and patience with the process. It asks you to endure discomfort for the sake of a greater, longer-lasting reward. Ultimately, the weight of responsibility transforms into strength. The very burden that once threatened to overwhelm becomes the foundation upon which freedom is built. Every decision made with awareness, every act of courage taken despite fear, every step into accountability fortifies character and builds resilience. Responsibility becomes a guide, reminding you that your actions matter, that your life has purpose beyond survival, and that the choices you make today will echo in the lives of those who come after you. To bear this weight is to embrace the full measure of your power, to step fully into the role of a guardian of legacy, and to understand that freedom is never just an individual victory. It is a collective one, nurtured by conscious, courageous, and deliberate acts. So as you continue on this journey of breaking generational demons, remember this. The weight of responsibility is not something to fear or avoid. It is a sign that you are moving in the right direction, that you are claiming the authority over your own life, and that you are willing to shape a future unburdened by the shadows of the past. It is heavy, yes, but it is the heaviest burdens that forge the strongest spirits. And it is in carrying this weight that you will discover not just freedom, but purpose, not just independence, but legacy, not just survival, but the transformative power to change what comes next. The reward beyond pain. After the storm of recognition, the courage to confront the loneliness of change and the weight of responsibility, there comes a moment, subtle at first, then undeniable, when the labor of breaking generational demons begins to show its true reward. It is not immediate. Freedom never is. There is no sudden release, no instant relief. The chains we inherit are not made of iron, but of habits, of beliefs, of invisible bonds woven through decades, generations, sometimes centuries. Yet, if we persevere, if we continue to stand in the discomfort, if we continue to act despite fear, despite resistance, despite the loneliness and the weight, we begin to feel something extraordinary. Clarity. Clarity that our life, our choices, and our very being are ours, not dictated by the shadows of the past, not controlled by the unseen patterns that once held us captive. The reward is a profound sense of liberation. It is the realization that every tear shed, every sleepless night endured, every difficult confrontation faced was not in vain. Each moment of struggle becomes proof of resilience. Each painful reflection becomes a stepping stone towards self-mastery. There is a serenity that comes when the echoes of inherited fear no longer dictate your decisions, when the whispers of doubt no longer define your identity. You feel lighter, not because the past has disappeared, but because its hold on you has finally loosened. You have claimed your life from the shadows that sought to define it, and in doing so you find a peace that is deeper than any comfort you have ever known. But freedom is not the only reward. There is also power, the quiet, unshakable power of knowing that you are no longer a prisoner of circumstance, of history, or of expectation. This power is not boastful or loud. It is measured, grounded, and deliberate. It is the ability to make choices without fear of repeating inherited mistakes. It is the ability to create boundaries that honor your well-being. It is the capacity to love without the compulsion to please, to forgive without forgetting, and to live without the invisible chains that once dictated your every step. This power is transformative, not only for you, but for those around you. Your courage, your clarity, your liberation sets an example for others, a path that they too may follow, and a legacy that cannot be undone. The reward extends beyond the personal into the relational. As you rise above the patterns of the past, you begin to notice the subtle ways in which your presence changes the world around you. Relationships once strained by fear or misunderstanding can now be approached with honesty and authenticity. Bonds that were limited by inherited cycles can be rebuilt on trust, respect, and intentionality. Even when reconciliation is impossible, even when bridges cannot be rebuilt, the knowledge that you have chosen freedom over repetition brings a sense of profound dignity. You understand that healing is not about controlling outcomes, but about mastering your response, your choices, and your commitment to break the cycle. The reward is not always visible to others, but it is undeniably real, etched into your character, your confidence, and your ability to stand unshaken. Perhaps the most profound reward, however, is the gift of legacy. Breaking generational demons is not only an act of liberation for yourself, it is an offering to those who come after you. Every fear you refuse to pass down, every habit you choose to replace, every shadow you confront becomes part of a new inheritance, one that carries the promise of freedom, self-awareness, and empowerment. Your children, your nieces, your nephews, even those you may never meet, inherit a world where the patterns of pain no longer rule. And there is a sacred satisfaction in knowing that the suffering you endured, the courage you summoned, the responsibility you carried was not in vain, that it has changed the trajectory of lives yet to be lived. In this, the labor, the sacrifice, the emotional toil transforms into a gift more powerful than any material wealth, more enduring than any accolade, more meaningful than any fleeting triumph. The reward is also deeply emotional. After enduring the discomfort of transformation, you feel a sense of wholeness, a quiet triumph, a profound relief that words cannot fully capture. There is pride, not arrogance, not vanity, but the pride of a soul that has faced its demons and prevailed. There is gratitude, not for the suffering endured, but for the lessons learned, for the insight gained, for the courage that emerged. And there is hope, a hope that is no longer fragile or dependent on external circumstance, but solid, grounded, and eternal. You begin to understand that while the past shaped you, it does not define you. You are the author of your life, the guardian of your choices, and the inheritor of a freedom that was once unimaginable. And perhaps most beautifully, the reward lies in the sense of alignment, the profound realization that you are living in accordance with truth. No longer are you guided by fear, by inherited patterns, by silence or compliance. You are guided by clarity, integrity, and intention. The world may still be messy, imperfect, and resistant, but your life, your actions, and your choices are finally your own. You move forward with confidence, grace, and a quiet strength that cannot be shaken. You have paid the price, the sleepless nights, the confrontation, the loneliness, the weight of responsibility. But the reward is greater than any suffering endured. It is the reward of freedom, the reward of self-possession, the reward of breaking the chains of the past and standing unshaken in the fullness of your own life. So, when the struggle seems endless, when the cost of transformation feels unbearable, remember this: every step, every sacrifice, every moment of courage is leading you to a reward that is profound, lasting, and life-changing. The reward beyond pain is not just freedom. It is power, clarity, legacy, and the peace that comes from knowing you have chosen to rise above what was inherited and embrace the life you were always meant to live. It is here, at the end of the journey, that you finally understand that the price was high, yes, but the reward is priceless.